Hello. So I know it's been a while since we had a live stream. I have been setting, so just so you know, there are videos coming. I have setting up podcasts and stuff. One with the interview. I mean, of course, Mike's coming back on, and I've been talking to. I can't remember his name. Uh, Brief. Yeah, his name is John Kenworthy, and I think I'm saying that right. And he's running for Congress. He ran last time. He got 3.8 of the vote. Yeah, he's supposed to come on. We're working on that, setting that up. He's gonna come on the podcast, and like just because like I forget everybody's name. Like I'm not really good with names, and so like unless you're close to me, I don't like it's yeah. Or if once I interact with people more, then I remember your name. But till then, like yeah. So I do have stuff coming, and then my friend Jared A. Not to be his name starts with a G. Not my other friend Jared, who is has also been on the podcast, but this is a new guy. We met. I think I talked about it a little bit. We met like first we were on like different sides, and we became friends due to like he's a bigger man, and so he helped, and we became friends that way. So I'm not perfect. I told you I'm not. So, but he's supposed to come on and talk about like COVID stuff. And how it affected him personally. I don't want to say too much because I want him to come on and he can tell the story. But that one I suggest is a must watch once it happens. But again, we're working. Everybody everybody's got different stuff, so we got to work around everybody else's schedules. Yeah. So, but what I'm going to talk about today is like what I noticed. So like when I talk like to political friends, like whether they're running for Congress or running for delegate or mayor, city council, I realized that a lot of them are really hardcore Republicans, but they're not really hardcore like American, like original, like conservative, American conservatism, or even you could say like liberalism. Before, no, I'm not talking about like classical liberals, like before it was whatever, but because they read the old books, a lot of them, and like they have their like areas, right, and they'll read those areas. Or it'll be one of them is like he knows a lot about the war. Actually, I come across more that know more about like historical wars that were fought in America and in the past than like the founders. So like, and my thing has been like getting back to the founder, like Constitution. So like if you go back to the Constitution. And this one's it started with the federal Constitution, right? I have a book on the second Constitution of Indiana, but which was brought about by mainly Democrats and brought in and voted on, which it had a lot of racist stuff in there. So, but moving past that, but once you start reading the founders, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and then not just them, like, of course, James Madison, and those are the ones that and I, like, again, I'm bad with names, but there's a lot of ones that you don't know, that you you should start reading, because there's more than just like the 5 or 10 that everyone talks about. There's quite a few of them. And when you start reading the fount like that generation, and then like the events, like you realize that Americans back then were like a different breed. There was none of this like I let the government do whatever it wants, and then if you don't like it, vote them out, right? And because if you look at how they wrote about like if you voted in these groups because they were supposed like these people because you thought that they had character and all this stuff and good values, and they turned out to be corrupt, what makes you think that that you'll be able to, the next group that you vote in will be uncorruptible or aren't corrupt either, right? And we also see this, that we vote, like a lot of times these people, they talk about lowering tax, and then once you get them in there, they're either hijacked by the system and they join the system, or they were corrupt in the first place. And that's why they were picked and put forth. Like we see this with how Trump is supporting opposition to Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie is like, he's actually really close to the founding, like the way he talks about things. You can tell that he's well read on the founders and the Constitution and what it's supposed to be. And what ends up happening is that the people who are like factionists, or they go along and they're Trumpers or whatever, and they're like, oh, he's a rhino. Like they don't even know what a rhino is. Like because really it's Trump and the majority of the Republican Party. The other people who are rhinos, who are passing a lot of these big spending bills and stuff like that. A conservative is not for big spending. And then but moving past that, and like when you start reading the founders and reading their writings, like especially on the Constitution, like the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, presidential war powers, like all this stuff, examples of how they were when they were in office, and it is like it starts to make you angry, because then you realize you've been shammed, and the politicians you have are like, the majority of them are rhinos, and they're not for liberty. They're for status quo. And I know these are like the words that everyone uses, but like it's the best to describe it. Like they're all for status quo. Even like there's people that I like, the ones that I like, who are more for liberty, but then they embrace large parts of the status quo, like because it's just ingrained in them to be that way. Like this. And like most Americans, most Republicans who are actually the voters who are politically involved, like it's the same way. And it's frustrating. Like that's why ignorance is bliss. Because if you don't know and you think it runs this way, then you're perfectly fine with putting up with, unconstitutional laws and treating them as laws. Like, for instance, the Second Amendment, and allowing the federal government, like they say with the Tax Act stamp, or the stamp to have different firearms. And I know that they're like, oh well, Trump lowered the price to $0, but then when it came time on questions to abolish it, the Trump administration, the DOJ, protected the Stamp Act, or I forget what that legislation is called. They made you have to get stamps for like silencers and automatic. Like they protected that federal gun control law, which all federal gun control is unconstitutional. Right, all federal gun control is unconstitutional. They have no power, and that is. I know the courts will say like, oh well, what did we see in the past? That's how'd they do it in the past or whatever. Like no, like the Constitution doesn't grant the federal government to regulate guns, like at all, and that is. And that is one of the biggest examples that we see And then you see all these 2A groups and people out there, and yet they're all following the law. Why? Because the government, specifically, especially when it comes to the federal, the executive branch and the agencies under it are the ones who are enforcing those unconstitutional laws. And I would argue, like, the whole reason that we allow them to do that, and because it's very clear that conservatives and a lot of people don't have any teeth. We're not built like the earlier generations of Americans. Like the ones that when Washington, I think it's about taxes or something, and I read a lot, but then as time passes, like I cycle, so I have to. Yearly, I go and I pick up old books that I have and I read through those again because my memory isn't always that great. So, but like they got together and they marched out, and Washington eventually they had to get the army and march down, and they were like, I don't really want to fight. Maybe it's not that worth it, right? But the point being is that, like, the old generation, if they felt they were wrong, like, they would hold the government accountable to the point where, like, they'd pick up guns and stuff and they'd make their point, right? Like, this is gonna, this is to the point where we're trying to we've went through the proper means, and you're violating your duties, which if they felt that way. So, and the founders also wrote that, like, even if you use your Second Amendment right, if you don't win your, not all the Second Amendment, but part of the Second Amendment right is your right to, overthrow a tyrannical government or an oppressive government and replace it with a new government that is more responsive or more reflects the will of the people, right? Because it's the people's will. Like, we're the ones with the power. Like, that's the beauty of the Constitution, is that all the power is granted from us. And one of the most important things is so, like, if you want to have a say, like, you don't focus on the federal, you focus on the state. That is the key. If you can get key positions, so, like, let's say you start a third party. I know people are like, there's a third party, libertarian, and there's other party. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I talk about, when I say third party, I mean like a party that is actually competitive, right? Like, if you can create a party that is competitive, then the key to, if you really want to voice your liberties and freedoms, is you have to start winning key political positions and get a majority. And then you get a governor, right? Because the governor is chief of the militia, of the whole state. But the founders said that the state. So, like, if you're, so let's say, for instance, the War Powers Act, which is unconstitutional by the framer. Like, if you go and read the framers on the War Powers, right? So, and then, like, whether it's Trump, Obama, Biden, Bush with the Afghan, like, it doesn't matter. Whoever you gotta put in that position to feel okay talking about it, right? All right, so War Powers Act is unconstitutional because it grants the president a certain amount of days to conduct operations on, like, foreign lands and stuff like that. But the Constitution actually gives the president 0 days. And then when you go and read the founders, and they tell you what declaring war is, and that's aggression. So, like, that could be a single bullet. That could be placing troops in a foreign country, bombing, covert operations, right? Like, all of that has to be approved by Congress. And the War Powers Act, it shifts that power that because the founders said, so, like, the difference between the executive and the king, like, say, it could be like England or, other kings, is that the executive, when it comes to war power, like fighting wars, is that kings can start wars, right? And they can end wars, but the president cannot. The power was placed in Congress because, and that was one of the main differences between, that's what, taking that power so that the president doesn't have the power of a king, doesn't reign like a king, is that he can't start wars. Because they say that kings can start wars often for like, whether it's for foreign allies or his own glory, or he feels insulted, right, about like someone's not doing what they want. And the president will start wars, or kings or whoever will often start wars due to that, and then place the whole country at risk. And and what they wanted to do is so they took that power from the president and they placed it in Congress, because then it slows the process down. Before you can't just go to war. Like now you got Congress, and it allows the states to have a voice too, the people to have a voice, and the representatives have to put their name to it. So then you have people who are actually responsible when they decide to go to war. And and this is one of the things why I believe that Congress actually likes the War Powers Act and allowing the president to do that to fight illegal wars and stuff like that, because then they don't have to put their name to it. They can say, oh, well, he's got this much. Like, what can we do? Like, he's got that much time before we can say anything. Like, that way, if it's popular, then later on they can be like, oh yeah. And if it's unpopular, they can be like, oh, well, I didn't vote for that. Like, that was the president did it. Like, because to me, like, Congress is full of cowards, especially politically. Like, we don't have, but don't get me, like, I could keep going. But like the whole point was to slow things down so that before we go to war, like one man can't just throw us into war. That was the whole point. And if you go and read, whether it's James Madison, Washington, Jefferson, go read and see what they wrote about this and what the early founders wrote about this. And you'll see that like exactly what happened, right? We'll use the Iran example where Trump decided that they were going to go in. Well, it wasn't really Trump. It was Israel, because Israel was the first to bomb. And then we were like, oh, well, if Israel go, we have to do it. Like, we had to intervene too, right? But like, and that's actually one of the things that they addressed is like going to war on behalf of, or fighting conflicts on behalf of other nations, because kings will do that, right? That they don't want that. They want to have the vote and the discussion first to see if it's even worth it, and then also give the people, because if you think about it, it's not the president his kids who are gonna be out fighting the war, or even those in Congress. Like, I think it's like Lindsey Graham, who's out there like, oh yeah, like they're not gonna be fighting the war. Like, it's going to be us and our kids. It's going to be American blood. And even Israel was talking about they don't want to put boots on the ground in Iran. Like it's, yeah. So like, I don't like spilling. I'm not going to spill American blood for foreign countries. Like, that's not other people's benefits. And by doing this, not only did we cause the world grief, but we also caused ourselves grief as well, like gas prices. And the same thing that happened under Biden too, like it started increasing taxes and stuff, because and Biden wanted to put boots on the ground. It was just so like, but, and that probably would have happened if Camilla got elected. So, like, either way, and the reason a lot of people voted for Trump is because he said that he was the president of peace. That they'd say like those in his administration and those campaigning for him, they would say, oh well, Camilla and the left are gonna get us in a war, but like if I get in, like it'll be peaceful or whatever. And like, yeah. So moving on. But if you have a state, right, and you think that the War Powers Act or whatever, like this war is unconstitutional, as a state, you can decide that it's unconstitutional. Like, they are the final say. The Supreme Court is not. Like, everyone thinks that the Supreme Court is the one who decides what is constitutional and what is not. Like, they don't. And if they did, that makes them the most powerful branch of the government, because they really decide what is law and what is not, or what can be, enforced as not. But that's not how it goes. If you read the founders, they even talk about this. So like you have the three branches, and they have their own powers, right? And actually, the judicial branch is meant to be the weakest branch, because without the executive branch enforcing their opinions, right, the things that they decide. So if a law is passed and they decide that it's constitutional, even if it's not, and the president is looking at it and he's like, this is like, I've went back on the Constitution or read, and I've read it, like a bunch of stuff on it, and like, this is not constitutional. He doesn't have to enforce that law, right? So the judicial branch has really no power, because it has no army, it has no police. It just writes opinions. It's kind of like, I mean, it's not a one-to-one, but it's kind of like most of us on the internet, right? Like there's a topic and we get on and we're like, and then people are battling, but like a lot of it is just opinions, and like it has there's no enforcement of it. It doesn't really change anything, right? But like that's how weak the judicial branch is without the other branches. Like it doesn't have anything. And then so like they're meant to have full power within their sphere of power. And so like it doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want, or say like they think that this like for instance that the president can say like, I have the power to do this start this war and stuff. Like you can't do that, because it's not. It depends on the Constitution itself, right? And its original meaning. The founders, and this is why they don't teach you in school, like the founders say that the Constitution that actually is law, the one that has the legal force and power, is the Constitution within the with the words meaning what they meant when they wrote it. Right, like not the meaning of the words now or whatever, so they can shift. No. The intent of the framers is with the words of their time and the meanings of their time. So you do have to go back and read what the definitions of like the dictionaries in their time and all that stuff to understand what they're actually saying. Right. So as you read the founders and you start understanding this, you see their views on factions. And so like on the war powers thing again, when I was the funny, like, because you have the left, right? They were like the no king protest or whatever. And whenever like I was in, because I argue with both the right and the left, because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat like full on. Like I don't care about that. And that's the other thing. As you read the founders and you start thinking more about liberty and freedom and what that means, as an American, like you start to realize that these two parties don't actually reflect liberty and freedom, cause like property taxes and all that. Like they both have them, they both support them. I mean, like there's certain candidates that say they don't. I've been to like some of these dinners and they're like, oh yeah, property taxes are evil, we're going to try and and then they get in there and they don't really do anything. Or they try and pass a law and it gets changed by their party and others to actually increases taxes in the long run and in different areas. Right. So like factionism, and then watching the people when Biden was in power, they were calling things illegal and they were pointing it out like, you can't do this, can't do that. And then Trump gets in and he's doing a lot of the same things, but it's things that they like because it's their guy and it's things that they like. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that's okay. Like, because, and then they find like different ways to justify it. And they're like, oh, well, this law over here and this, and actually the founders. So I don't know if it was Noah Webb or, his name is right there, but I can't think of what his name is. I'll do a video on it because I gotta look up his name. But Lysander, is it Lysander Spooner? I want to say that's his name. Because he talks about like his thing is like jury nullification, and then also talks about constitutional law, and then what's this? The early Supreme Court justice as well. But anyways, I'm getting off, and now I'm losing my train of thought. But I was talking about how the parties and how all right. So in the founders wrote how party spirit is one of the most dangerous things to the Constitution and to our country because like loyalty to a party is very like is a thin line to treason, right? Because you'll go and treason being like violating of supporting the violation of the federal the Constitution and law, the law of the land, and it's because it's usurpation of power, which any branch or person in the government that does that is committing treason against the people, because when you read the Constitution, like these are the powers that we allow them to have, and the Constitution is there to limit them, not us. It's there to limit them, right, and what they can do, and anytime they try and go outside of those bounds, they are breaking the law. Like they are becoming criminals. It's just that, like, and like the founders said, right? They said this too, that if the government is the one that has to be is the judge of what is right or wrong, or to hold themselves accountable, then they're pretty much there's no one that's holding them accountable, because the government will allow themselves to take all the power at once, because that's what they do, right? That's the natural nature of government, and that's why the states are so important. So we're coming full circle, but when they do that, and that's why people are like, well, why are you so hard on Trump with this war? Which I was hard on Biden with the war, and like, because I'm like, this is not just a violation. Like, and I don't care that it's Trump. I hated it when Obama did it. I hated it when Biden did it, and I wasn't old enough to hate it when Bush Jr. did it, because like I wasn't really into politics that much. Not like that. I was just starting to read about the Constitution and conservatism, and but anyways, but like, and now that I do know, I hate it because the Patriot Act that came from Bush Jr. That allowed Obama and Biden to use the FBI and homegrown terrorists, put people on the homegrown terrorist watch list for having just like really American views, is crazy. It is crazy, but that's why it's key. It comes back to the states, so like the states are the final judge of what's constitutional, not the Supreme Court, not Congress, not the president or the executive branch and the bureaucracy and the agencies, right? They are not the final judges. The states themselves, at the end of the day, are the ones who decide, and they have the power to ignore unconstitutional law. So if it doesn't fall within the constitutional powers, and the states see this and they decide that it does not, then they can ignore it. Like, that's their power. And that's why I say it's important for us to, like, if there was a party or something, you could elect people that would run the state in a way that reflects, liberty and freedom for the people, right? And would protect that. Like, they would ignore a bunch of federal laws and stuff like that. And anytime, because it's hard for people to ignore the law, and because often that's what happens. And then what they do is they come and they take you in the middle of the night, and they have so much force. And since a lot of the states go along with it too, like, it's the state governments and the federal, and it's one person standing against like an army of that is basically enforcing an unconstitutional law and violating your rights. but they can do it because might makes right, right? Like if you can't resist it, and then when you do resist it, the news comes out and they make you look like an evil person, right? So like it's all stacked against you. But if you are able to get people elected and sway and have a state that reflects, and there's enough conservatives and people out there, like even on like center left that shoot guns and stuff like that, and they're actually pro Second Amendment. There's enough between them and then the right. Like if they actually showed out politically and participated, that like overnight you could own whatever gun you wanted, and you could change the government to make it where like any Democrat who like proposed 2A amendment, or any Republican or whatever, like they would no longer have a career in politics in Indiana. Like, and we need to repeal the red flag law, which basically, I mean, it violates your basic American human rights, right? Your right to due process. Because I mean, in other countries, you don't have a right to due process. You're basically guilty, and then you have to prove you're innocent, which is what Trump said in his first term. I think it was after one of the school shootings when he was talking about national red flag laws. He said that he was sitting there talking with the Democrats and stuff, and he was talking about like, and this is what he said. He says, I don't like to wait. He's like, I like taking the guns first and due process later. Right? Which is basically saying like, you're guilty and we're going to take your guns. And then you gotta come to a judge and prove that you're innocent to get your stuff back, or and to not face the consequences, which is one of the most un-American things. There's the Fourth Amendment. A good part of the Constitution is written to help protect you from that. And juries used to be a big part of that, but today, like there isn't enough people educated on what the founders and the Constitution to actually be protected, to have a jury that's actually going to protect you from that, because everybody thinks that the way that things are the way that things have always been and are supposed to be. Like things are, the government is running legally and it's enforcing constitutional law when it's not. It's making up its own laws, even unconstitutional, that are not and the founder said any unconstitutional law is not a law and it should be ignored. But what the government does is it makes unconstitutional laws, acts as if it's legitimate, and then uses force to force you to follow that law. So even if you decided that you could read and see all this stuff, like it's unconstitutional, I'm not going to follow it. Well, good luck, because first you have to survive when they kick down your door and shoot your dog, because everyone talks about the ATF, right? But I got off on the right. But so I'm gonna finish this up. So like the main core of this video is to talk about how like a lot of the people that represent you, and so like they don't read the founders. A lot of them don't care. But then the good ones who talk about the Constitution and stuff, like they haven't read enough of the founders. They're not, otherwise they would be more radical than they actually are. But when you start pushing them on different subjects, you see that like in certain areas, they're like very constitutional. And then especially military people, like I don't know what it is. Like if they've been in the military, Marines, Navy, Army, whatever, like they more lean towards a stronger executive branch that can just intercept, where like you can do missions and stuff, and they're like, well, we got to be able to act fast or whatever. This like no. And I often point out that if you're okay with the president, using unconstitutional, expanding his powers and abusing that, then you have to be okay with the judicial system doing it, or Congress. Like, because if you're like, with COVID and how they violated our rights, but it was necessary, right? To get a hold, like we didn't know what's going to happen with COVID. So it was necessary for us to violate your rights and force you to follow these things and take liberties, shut down businesses, because that's essentially what they did. They shut down a bunch of small businesses because they didn't allow them to operate like normal, or, especially food businesses, to the point where if the business was like, I'm going to operate anyway, they sent police and other government officials to shut it down and arrest people and fine people, right? But then they allowed the big box stores and corporations to stay open. They picked winners and losers, and they shaped the if you want to talk about an economic attack on the American people, like COVID was that, on top of taking their violating their civil rights, or their rights in general, their human rights, all across the board. Trying to put in place, measures that you have to, towards the end, they were trying to, you have to have some kind of digital ID to show that you're vaccinated so that you could work or maybe travel across. I was like, this is crazy, right? And a lot of people just went along with it, and it was like, man, that's crazy. They almost got us, and that's how we know that we are not like the early generation, for all their flaws. But when they got upset, they had no hesitation in grabbing the rifles and being like, I'm not going, right? And that's what we lack as a people now, is that we lack that kind of, I would say, rebellious spirit, but it's actually not a rebellious spirit. It's defending, it's lawful. It's defending your rights. It's what our Constitution, it's what our entire, our philosophy, our culture, has been, that is American culture. It's kind of, it's freedom and liberty. But if you have to act like a right, if you need a permit to exercise a right, you don't have liberty. So, and that's going back. So if they actually taught this in school, and we raised our kids with these ideas, and actually that way they're not thinking that, trans rights is what actually matters, because that's not really a thing. Because basic rights, protect everybody. That's just what it is. They're like, oh, well, what about the murdering of trans? And it's like, well, first off, you're not allowed to murder people. So they're kind of covered. And don't get me wrong, there's times in America where, blacks were murdered and it was okay to do that. But it wasn't it was in violation of our rights. And that's one of the things that started the abolitionists and stuff, and a national debate, is because when the Declaration of Independence, and they're talking about, God-given rights, and they're like, well, we kind of, we can't, it's looking sketchy. That's the beauty of these ideas, these American ideas, is that Americans really held to them, and they have real impact, to the point where when you have the contrast and you start to see an inconsistency, a lot of people start calling it out, and there's people who defend it. I know I keep going back to this, I'm sorry, but when we have the discussions of whether the Iranian war is legal or not, you have a lot of people defending the right of the president to act illegally and start a war, because it is an Iran war. Everyone knows it's a war, and then but when you press someone, I'll be like, oh, well, it's a war, and they're like, no, it's a conflict. like it's a conflict. Like, what do you think a war is? Like, I don't know what else, but I mean, when you bomb a country, like it's, anyways, and I'm not like, I don't like Iran at all. And if we were going to go to war with Iran, it should be over our own interests in the first place, and not another country's interests. And we shouldn't allow other countries to ruin our peace talks, because they're not going to be able to reach their goal. If there's actual agreement between a long-term peace agreement between Iran and the United States, they know that their goals are going to be much harder to meet, right? And Israel is in the process of expanding, like America did, right? Israel's a relatively new country still. It's young. I mean, America's still a relatively young country, but we went through that stage of expansion where we did some terrible things to people, and that's how we got the whole United States, and we got all this land and stuff. I mean, but that's what that's what a lot of nations do. Like they're like expanding and doing terrible things is not uncommon for nations, for a lot of the nations that exist today, and they seem to forgot that. But I don't live over there in the Middle East, right? So if Israel wants to go to war and fight with all that stuff, like that's fine. Like let them do what Israel does. They need to do what's best for Israel. But I don't want to fund it. Like don't use my tax dollars. Like that should come here. But I know why we send all this money overseas and stuff, because we're printing too much money. And if if we spent the money that we're sending overseas here, the inflation here would be out of control. So like, there's all these issues that we have to fix, because the Fed is a big danger to our country, and the money and the debt. The politicians, like the big beautiful bill and like bills in the past, are a threat to America, are a threat to America because of the spending, trillions and trillions of dollars, right? Oh, and that's not even that is like our debt. That's not even the true amount. That's what makes it so, that's what makes it so, I know my hair's crazy, but, so dangerous. But like, if we were actually like our ancestors, or like the founding generation, a lot of this stuff would have been nipped in the bud, and our politicians would fear. Like I know people talk about violence and politics. Like the founders knew that violence and politics went hand in hand, right? Like not all the time. Like you want to settle it, you want to be able to settle it through legal means, but like if the government itself is not willing to respond to the people, like that's why the Second Amendment is there. Is because violence is an option, and they know that the government is no stranger to using violence. The government will use violence sometimes as a first resort, and then justify it later on its own people. And that's a big reason why they try and disarm us, because they want to have a monopoly, and they're afraid. They're afraid because they're seeing more and more people getting angry over different things, and now that's why you see these pushes for gun control and stuff. And I know that Trump says all this stuff with like, when it comes to the Second Amendment, they often Trump and his administration talk out of both sides of his mouth. Don't take my word for it. Like, go watch some of the 2A channels that cover the different lawsuits and stuff. You'll see that his DOJ and stuff is defending a lot of gun control, and a lot of the pistol brace thing, the whole, like, even though a judge deemed it, unconstitutional, or that it's not a law, they said they're basically still going to enforce it. And they feel like, so they're just going to go ahead and do it anyways. So even though like they don't have the right to do it in the first place. But yeah. So like, if I was able to, or if be a part or influence a new third party or whatever, like one of the main things I would do is like once you get control of the state, like especially like educational system, the public education system, like just like math, reading, and science is a core, so is understanding your political system, how it works, understanding the on both the state, like your state, county, and city, right? Understanding how all those different offices, the school system, all that, and then your state legislature and everything else. Like you get like learning about that through your like what is it? I don't know how many, 12 years or I don't know, however many years you spend in school. From elementary to middle school, right? Like from there, like you would spend learning, like just like it was reading or math, you would spend learning about the founders and basically and your state constitution as well. So first, your federal. You learn about the writings on each topic of the First Amendment, how they disagreed, how they agreed. You learn about the anti-federalists because the anti-federalists are actually federalists. The federalists that we talk about, like Washington, all that, like they were nationalists. So you have to like, because some of the things that happen today, how they like the labels and stuff, and how they try and demonize so that you know the discredit, like that stuff has been going on since for forever. Like that's those tactics and stuff, and that's what actually happened. Is they got labeled as anti-federalists, but they were actually more federalists than the people than the people we call federalists, right? And you just have to go read the like, or you don't have to read it. Like now you can listen to the letters. There's all kinds of stuff that you have access to now that it makes it really easy to learn. But yeah, that stuff, they learn both sides of that, the arguments, the arguments at the convention, the writings of the founders on each topic. And then you just go from there. And then other like, on religion and stuff like that, religious freedom. Yeah, like that would be like the whole thing. You'd have to learn all of that, and then when you graduate high school, so you know math, and I'd also make the education system not geared towards going to college. Like your goal should not be like to educate people to go to college. It also shouldn't be to educate people to work in factories either. Like you want entrepreneurs, and you want smart workers, and you want all the way around. You want the whole package. So like if they want to go to college, like you don't have that big a focus, but if they want to get like become a surgeon and go to college for that, like they that's what they should do. But don't try and funnel people into the college experience when there's all these other avenues that we can. And we've done this. And then they rack up debt and all kinds of stuff, and people feel like there's no way out. Well, the reason that is because we're ignoring all these other things that would give them freedom, more freedom, and create more wealth. And like our government does a good job because taxes are to keep you enslaved. And the founders wrote about this as well. That's what they do is they use war, taxes, and I forget what the other one is, to keep you enslaved. But yeah, like that's what I mean. You just got to read the founders. And I use founders generically because there's a bunch of them, right? Like there's and it's not just like the founding fathers. There's also like people who came after them who wrote about, and you just got to read, like you got to go through it all a little bit. I'm not saying you have to read every single document, but as you start to go through and ask these questions and see, it's like, oh, like there's this whole, like this doesn't, like, it's kind of like people who read the Bible. So like if you went to church your whole life and you're like, oh, I'm a Christian, right? And you go to your church and then you're like, well, you never actually read the Bible for yourself. And then you start reading the Bible and you start going like, wait a minute, like, why doesn't the church look like what I'm seeing in the Bible, right? Like, why is it run this other way? Why is it so fluffy? I didn't know that Jesus, when he confronted these and taught these other things, right? Like, why do we put so much emphasis on Paul? And a lot of times we kind of like tamper down what Jesus says, right? Because it's too Jewish, or I mean, that's really what it is. And I'm not, again, I'm just saying, like, if you look at it, a lot of times, so like when I bring up when Jesus, it's Matthew chapter 5, and he talks about the law, and he says, I did not come to abolish, but to uphold or to fulfill. And that word doesn't mean what people think that, like, the fulfilled, it means to bring to an end, but in that word can mean to live out perfectly, I mean, like, and you can see from the context, that's what Jesus is saying. He's not saying that it's over. He didn't say, like, well, I came to complete it, but he said, no, I came to live it, like, basically to live it out, to fulfill it. And says that not one jot or one tittle shall pass away from the law until all things, my mind's working like 100 miles an hour. But not one jot or one tittle shall pass away till heaven and earth pass away. And I've read that verse so many times, and then but then you're like, oh, well, has heaven and earth passed away? Like, no. But when does there is a new heaven and earth that's supposed to come. So there is a period where we do get a new heaven and earth, right? And this heaven and earth does the old, it's renewed, and the version that we have passes away, right? Like, so when is that? Like, that's not till after he comes back and restores everything. And then, literally, right now, when Jesus says that those who teach people to keep it, basically, will be blessed in heaven, or will be called, some of the best of us, pretty much. And then those who teach men to break the least of these commandments will be considered least in the kingdom, right? Which is it's crazy. How many times I passed that over, and then the heaven and earth, and I realizing that heaven and earth is, the scriptures do, even in the Old Testament, and they do talk about it passing away. So that there will be a time when we have a renewed or a new heaven and earth in the universe and everything. So it's interesting. But anyways, not just that, but there's other stuff too, that when I read Jesus and I'm like, oh, and then people use Paul to reject some of those things that Jesus wrote, or people not thinking, because people say that the Bible is, infallible or whatever, and they don't realize that even if it was, you don't have the infallible version. You have copies that do have mistakes, and we have lots of copies, and we're able to kind of go through and look, and that's why some versions have more words than others, and some have less verses, and this are because whether, I know some people it's uncomfortable for them to hear this, but we don't have the perfect gospels, or we don't have them we don't even have the original gospels. We can work back to what we best think is. Some of the church fathers say that Matthew was one of his was originally written in Hebrew, right? And not Aramaic. There's oh my gosh, people say, well, Jesus spoke Aramaic. He might have spoke Aramaic, but he spoke Hebrew, and Aramaic is not Hebrew. You have to know language, even just basics about language, ancient languages, and to know that when it talks about Hebrew in the Bible, it is not talking about Aramaic. It's talking about Hebrew, right? Because there is Aramaic in the Bible. In the Old Testament, we have Aramaic, but it's not Hebrew. No scholar would be like, oh, that's Hebrew, right? No, they don't. That's why they call it Aramaic. And then other parts of the Bible are written in Hebrew. But for some reason, when we come to the New Testament, we just kind of smash it all together. It doesn't work. It doesn't. But you kind of have to read the scholars to you got to go through the scholar stuff to then see they differentiate Aramaic when they want to. Like when they actually have to admit it, they do admit like, oh, well, Aramaic and Hebrew is different. And we do find Hebrew from Jesus's time, right? We do, like, it wasn't a dead language back then. But that's what you hear. Like this, the truth is, I'm sorry, but like your church, a lot of your biblical scholars and stuff, they're not telling you the full truth. Even though they know more, they just simplify it and they try and stick to the view. Because it's, for one, even if they wanted to tell you the truth, like a lot of people would resist that anyways, because they're so used to what's there, right? And second, I mean, they've built this whole system. Like the whole system runs on this notion. And it's even people, it's hard to change beliefs, even their beliefs. So they're willing to, ignore details. People do that. Scientists do that. They ignore things that don't fit the thing that they wanted. Like Albert Einstein is a famous one for that. When it came to the universe and having a beginning or an end or something like that, and then the Hubble telescope changed his mind. Like that's not specific. You can go read that story. I'm just pulling things from memory. So at this point, I'm just rambling. So I'm gonna finish it up here. The point is that you got to read the founders. Once you start going back and you start reading them, and not just one or two, you got to read like a good spectrum and start seeing that, like, and you'll see that a lot of your heroes, like Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant. Like the founders, if they could have, like if someone could have woke up the founders and brought them, or went to the past and brought them to that time when Abraham Lincoln was imprisoning people and suspended habeas corpus, or you're right, without Congress, and then Congress later on follows up later. But if they were to see what he did, like they would call Abraham Lincoln a tyrant, and like Abraham Lincoln is a tyrant. And then to talk about slavery, you're like, I know people are like, well, he abolished, like he didn't. It was a wartime thing, and it was in the South. That slavery was still legal in the North, and they still enforced runaway slave laws and stuff like when you go back and you actually look at history versus the version that you're given at school and all these Republicans and stuff they tell you and all that, like. Even the Democrats love Abraham Lincoln, modern, because he's a good example of a person who expands their power, right? And it does the things that they want to do. They want to take your freedom of speech without having to go through anything. Like they want to just do things. And a lot of Democrat heroes are people who just do things, and a lot of Republican heroes are. Like the progressives started in the Republican Party. Like if you, like that's an uncomfortable fact, but it's true. Yeah, there's a lot of history that you need to go back and like, even if it's just listening to audiobooks, on your day, but like find books that they wrote, find books that like actually quote them, not just quote them, but large portions. Like there's constitutional books that I listen to, or about the Constitution. Like there's one, I have to go and find it, and I'll tell you guys. I'll start posting books on here too that you should read, or like a booklet. I'm not telling you what you should read or shouldn't read. I'm just saying like books that would be good to read that are helpful, right? And there's one that goes through the Constitution. It goes through each amendment, right, and the different parts of the Constitution. And it gives you the debates, different letters, like the quotes or the conversations some of the founders had on it and what they had decided on. And it gives you like that information. And you're like, oh, okay, I can see that. And then as you start, like those kind of books are good for a foundation. And then as you start reading the individual founders and stuff like that, and it starts to fill in, you're like, oh, whatever this system is we have now it's not that system. Like it's almost like a parasite or something that's leached on, and it tricks the host body to think that it's part of the body, like it's supposed to be there, and that's pretty much what's happened. And it's not supposed to be there. It's not supposed to be there. But yeah, all right. Well, shalom, and I hope God blesses your family. Stay safe out there. Wake up. And yeah, become American radicals, because the American radical of today was the average American of the founders' time, right? The only reason you're a radical today is you go against the elite's will, you're right, like in the tyrannical government, like you're not what they want you to be. You're not a slave. Person who who is working to regain their liberty and freedom is a radical to them. Like, and they're not all radicals. I'm not saying just because the person's a radical that they're all of a sudden this like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a constitutional, like this, an American radical, the ones that like you look at your I guess I'll find it. You look at the founding and you carry on that spirit. You start to instill that spirit in your kids. You talk about it with your neighbors. And I'll tell you that most people they will see you as radicals because they don't know this stuff. They're ignorant. And ignorant people who only know like what it is now, right? They're going to push back against you until they themselves look. So I've had many arguments and stuff with people, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're just so far out there," and then like whether it be a month, a year later, I run into them and they're like, "You were right." I went back and I looked at some of the stuff that you said, and that actually started me on this journey, and I realized that you were right. So like, again, when I was saying like, when someone was like, "Oh, well, the president's, the War Powers Act and this and that," and I was like, "You got a king, right? Like if he's able to do that, he's more like a king than he is a president." And they were like, "Oh, well, you're like the left, the no king." I'm like, no. I'm not quoting the left. I'm not saying this isn't my personal belief. Like, I'm quoting the founders. The founders said this, the difference between the king and the president. The president can't start a war. He can't do acts of aggression, right? The only thing that the president has is if someone is attacking America, if there is an imminent attack, not an imminent, like not a threat, meaning like, oh, like this is a threat to America's supremacy in the world, right? So we got to go bomb them. Like that's not what they mean. What they mean is like if someone is actually going to attack the United States, if troops or something, or a missile was launched at the United States, the president can then act to defend the United States without Congress. That's the only thing. Like if there's boots on the ground somewhere, like they land in Alaska, the president doesn't have to wait for Congress. He can deploy troops to defend Alaska right then and there, right? So like that's what he can do without congressional authority. What he can't do is what they all do for the last, I don't know, last few decades. But then we see this growth of like, I gotta stop. Because there's just so much. And it's like, I gotta finish this up. So, shalom, and I hope you have a good week. And remember, like, yeah, be an American radical. Like, learn your foundation. Yeah, that's the only way we're going to turn the tides. And if you're like most of remember, even the constitutional ones, the ones that look good, they're not radical enough. Like, they don't have they have parts of the American spirit, but they haven't read enough of the founders. They're not fired up. They're not even angry enough to like it's just not like all you have to do. Like at first they all sound good, but then as you push, and this is everybody. Like there's a lot of things I don't know. I want to fix the healthcare system, but I don't know much about it. So right. like there's things that I don't know when it comes to like some of the like Supreme Court stuff and all that. All right, I'll granted that, but I can tell you that a lot of times when I go and look, it's not what people are telling me, and it's, oh, this is why, and the Supreme Court doesn't decide it on like what the president's war powers are, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like the Supreme Court doesn't decide what the president's war powers are. The Constitution does. And they're very, very specific. Like you just have to go read the founders. And then you have to look. We even have examples. So read it, become radicals, you know, be the kook that your neighbors think you probably are, the 2A gun, whatever. Yeah, just don't be the guy. We got to stop being these people who say slogans, vague slogans, or we whine about stuff, but we don't actually expect anything to done, and then we vote for the same disgusting people and they are disgusting, because if you're destroying my liberty, or you're passive in a lot of ways, or even if like I said, like a lot of these military people, like they're willing to, like when it comes to like action, like even if it might not be constitutional, but they're like, oh, we're in a new age. Like they didn't have rockets and stuff back in the founders' days. Like, so like, you know, these aren't like you can't, it doesn't matter. Like, it gives me the ick. It gives me the ick. But don't be like them. Like, and if you want the president to have those constitutional, if you want to move that power from Congress to the president, then you need to do it constitutionally. You need to do an amendment. Amend the Constitution, and then give the president that power, and then see how fast things go downhill, because the founders were smart. They give us the reasons why they did stuff. Even Alexander Hamilton, who was like the big government guy of the time, like when you go and you read, I'm not going to go into the rant, but I'm just going to say, when you go and you read the Anti-Federalist Papers and what they said would happen, and you look at now, and you're like, yep, that happened. And then you realize, and then you learn about the Federalists and how much they actually wanted to give the federal government more power than what it got. And then you realize that like they left things vague, and that's why some areas the government has been able to grow or misuse portions of the Constitution to gain powers of like free market, like we see with like Obamacare and creating like a government and then destroying markets, like and raising costs, like yeah, just read, like, and then you can have this same disgust and ick that I have. But we need more people like this. So when they go to these Republican dinners and, these politicians throw out these slogans and stuff, and it should turn your stomach and make you angry at them, so that like those people don't get elected anymore. And if you actually want to vote people in that are going to do what they promised that you wanted them to do and not turn their back, like they got to know that you're gonna not just vote them out, but that you're gonna be angry, and that there are other consequences. It's the same thing for like a standing army, or like how they wanted the military, they wanted the federal government to have to use the militias of the states and create a standing army every time, and that each militia, when they would go to war, it would be from people from their communities, because that way the officers and stuff that are from their communities, like controlling these units and stuff, like if that person does the dick move or like for glory or whatever, or just doesn't listen and gets a bunch of people killed, like he will have to face those consequences back in his community for the rest of his life. And that is like that makes so much sense. Like if you're in the military now, like most of the time the people aren't even from where you're from, right? And they're just at a station. And the officers and stuff, like they'll make decisions and they don't care because after they get out, it's not going to follow them. Like, so your son and daughter is lying dead because that officer decided that he wanted, I'm going to take this hill and get credit or whatever, or this place, and we're going to do this. And he makes a tactical mistake that everyone told him not to do, and he does it anyways because he feels like, we'll just take it. And then he keeps throwing bodies at it until they do take it. And it turns out to be this massive botch. Or, the government just decides, we're going to, Afghanistan, we're going to give them all of our equipment and all this stuff and the bases and technology and make the enemy that we've been fighting and lost, told people that their children are spilling their blood for freedom, that fighting, right? And then we're going to just re-equip them and then legitimize them. And that, Obama, Biden, and President Trump are going to be seen shaking hands with like the Al-Qaeda leaders and like these terrorists that fought your sons and stuff, and legitimizing them as some kind of. And if you don't, like, just go look. That's all you got to do. If you're a pro Trump and all you see is good stuff about him, and I'm not against, like, people are like, well, why are you so against Trump? Because he's the one that's in office right now. When it was a Biden, I was against Biden. And then, the left would say like, well, you're just a right-wing bigot. You don't like Biden because you don't like the same arguments that a lot of these Trumpers and stuff put against me is the same arguments the left was putting against me when it was Biden or Obama. Like, nobody likes to hear that their guy is fucking up or doing pieces of shit moves, right? When they think that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread or whatever, like, they don't. Like, he's doing fucked up shit too. And that's why, like, the honest people are now like, I kind of regret voting because we're not getting what we were sold. And then the always Trumpers are like, well, you can't, we don't want to ruin it. You guys are just whining and you need to stop complaining and you're not real conservatives or this and that. Like, no. Like they see it. You just gotta look for it. And if someone is consistent, you look like Thomas Massey, where like the whole a good portion of the Republican Party hate him because he always votes for American first when they don't always vote for American first. They vote for their own interests. They vote for what they're told to vote for, even if it goes against American first. Like, they're for the team. Massey's for the people. And that's what it should look like. And I'm not saying that Massey is some saint or whatever. I'm just saying that, like, and you'll see this in local politics and everywhere. Like, the person who is actually for the people, who is actually consistent and doesn't just shift when the team shifts, right? They're always demonized. They're always pushed out of the group, right? In elections, they always put the yes man ahead of that person. The party does, the leadership, the establishment, right? Like, all right. This time, shalom, and y'all have a good night. Share the video, please. Share the video. It helps. I guess if you feel like what I'm saying is right, or it should be heard or whatever, share the video with your Congress. Share it with your Republican leadership, the conservative groups that you're in. Like, post it in there, like, because this is something that needs to be heard. Now, even if it's not for me, make your own videos too. Like, read the founders and then become radical and then start making your own videos too. That way it can spread, and then we can, like, because if you get a big enough group, like, in order for the third party to work, you got to have the voters and the support and the ideas implanted. So, like, let's get this movement going. And that way, as a state, we can stand against the federal government's violations of the Constitution and fight for our liberty and our freedom. And I mean, that means abolishing property taxes, like, oh man, holding insurance companies accountable, holding healthcare or hospitals accountable, working to actually make things affordable, not through more government like seepage into these, like, no, by reducing, like cutting the things. Like, if we want to regulate things, it should be regulating the insurance companies and the things that drive up costs, right? Instead of regulating against the people, we need to regulate, put regulations in position that help the people, and not just help the people. It's doing the government's job, because it's to protect our rights and stuff. And if we're being priced out because, prices are being driven up because hospitals know that the insurance company is going to only pay this much, so they drive the price way up. And then the insurance companies are not going to pay that, and they know they're only going to get like half or whatever from the insurance company, but they price them. Which then, in turn, if you don't have insurance and you're trying to pay for something, and the cost is like astronomical for something that, like, you read some of these things and like just simple things, and they cost like hundreds or thousands of dollars. It doesn't make sense because it didn't cost that much to make it, and it doesn't cost that much to buy it. And we know this because in some states they've enacted laws where you get to see the actual what they paid for it, right? Like, but yeah, we can shrink government to a very small amount to where it works for us. But it's so big that it works against us, and it's hard to rein anything in. But all right, I'm out of here. Shalom. I guess, be far right and stay radical. Be that, yeah.